Okay, so we're in this mini theme of looking at Tantra for the modern world. We've been looking at Vajrayana Tantra for the modern world. And just to recap, last week we had a puja, but a couple of weeks ago I was talking about making life magic. And some of the ways we do that, I mentioned are through myth and symbol, and that's the area we're going to be looking at this evening is myth and symbol. But you might remember part of what we've been talking about is the importance of having all of our energies available on the path, having all of our energies available. And Tantra, the tantric path of Buddhism, is particularly one of its emphases is in speaking to our energy, getting our energies available, and particularly the wilder energies, maybe the un-Buddhist energies, the wilder energies, getting those available and on board. And you could say as a consequence, as a fruit of having our energies on board, well, life can start to become more magical. There can be a mythical, archetypal dimension to life which can start to come alive more when we've got our wilder energies in play. So this is something I talked about a couple of weeks ago. And in that kind of space, events can take on a deeper significance. There can be a kind of a mythic, deeper truth to events. So Tantric Buddhism does use symbols in this way. It uses some quite shocking symbols, some extreme symbols to speak to these wilder aspects of us, these un-Buddhist energies within us. Tantric Buddhism uses some shocking symbols to engage those parts of us. And Vidani was talking this weekend on our retreat about teaching the Darkanies. We have to get these energies on board, and then they need to be educated. But first of all, we need to engage them, we need to speak to them, and then we need to educate them, to train them. So what we're doing in this series is we're not trying to recreate kind of 12th century Vajrayana Buddhism. What we're trying to do is look at the principles that underlie it and look at how we can use those principles today in our age and culture. So this evening we're going to be looking at this aspect of myth and symbol, and looking at how we can take that principle and use myth and symbol to harness, to speak to engage our energies. So we're going to have 3 short talks. There'll be a talk by Steph about a particular symbol that speaks to her and her relation to symbols. Maitridasa is going to talk about a different symbol that connects to him. And then I'll end by talking about a mythic story that really connects for me, that engages my emotions. So Steph.
I'm going to start by talking about what symbols are to me and what I mean by symbol. Because life's always been full of myth and symbol for me. I just didn't know to call it that before I found Buddhism. I thought I was just very imaginative, but now I think that I am more in touch with reality. It's not just a question of being imaginative. And to me, the symbolic and the mythical are more real than other ways of seeing the world, because without it, the world just seems flat and doesn't make much sense. I mean, it'd just be really pointless and dull if we just took everything literally and at face value. For example, the mug. Literally, it's just an object made of ceramic that we used to put things like tea in. But symbolically, it represents much more than that. It represents a tea break. A tea break. Time to drink, chat with friends, make new friends, listen, be heard, come together in spiritual friendship. And when I was training to be an occupational therapist, the cup of tea was a symbol of the therapeutic relationship. Almost gaining mythical status as an effective tool, the cup of tea as a gateway into gaining trust, and therefore being able to work with people to achieve things that they didn't think they'd be able to do. That's what symbols are, they're gateways. And symbols are an important language, really. Everything is a symbol for something. So we can apply our own meanings to things to bring our world alive and give it depth, even in the most mundane of activity. And some things are universally understood, like the cup of tea, whilst other things need a deeper response to be understood. And these symbols are more mythic and speak to our depths. And if we have a response to something, we need to trust that response. We are looking at a gateway, and that's a gift. It's the communication from the universe to our higher selves. And quite often we either ignore our response to something or try to rationalise it. And seeing an object or an image in symbolic terms, resonating with it, It's our deeper consciousness telling us something. It's a way in to move from how we are now and stepping towards our future selves and making spiritual progress. And quite often we don't give time to acknowledge this response. We don't give ourselves the time or the stillness to feel the vibrations of the symbol resonating within our depths. And sometimes we might feel it, but choose to distract ourselves, like for me it's Strictly or Facebook. We know something might happen, and that can be scary. But every time we distract ourselves, we turn away from a gateway, and therefore from the opportunity to transform. And if we trust that response, if we take the moment to feel the vibrations of whatever we feel a resonance with, we can have the greatest adventure, even in the mundane, even if we're just sitting drinking a cup of tea. And I want to talk about a mythical symbol that's very close to my heart, and it's become a part of me, it's transformed my life. One of the first mythical symbols that I resonated with when I first came to the centre, I think it was winter 2007, it was the flaming sword of wisdom as held aloft by Manjushri. I had found my gateway. I had no idea at the time what that represented. All I knew was it resonated me on a very deep level, and I'm still only just beginning to understand what that means. And what I've learned to do is to trust that response, to walk through that gateway, call on that symbol for strength and courage and be transformed. I've changed quite a lot over the past few years, and that's got a lot to do with trusting in the mythical symbol of the sword and walking many, many times through that gateway. So what was it about the sword that first got my attention? It was the energy. It's held high in the air, active, ready to be used. The symbol of a warrior, the sword is not for wimps. This resonated with my energy. When I first came to the centre, I was full of anger and anxiety and a bit of ferociousness in there. No time for injustice or people not being honest with me. If pushed enough, I'd use my anger like a sword, cutting down anything that got in my way with harsh words and forceful energy. And the flames. My anger was a fire. My sense of injustice burned. And my desire for change, and sometimes revenge, spilled out of me like a weapon being thrown around my head in a very unwieldy manner. But more often than not, my anger just burned me. A fiery ball in my belly that was very painful. And the blade, long and slender, this is no poxy little dagger. The sword could really slice and make a swoosh. It meant business, and that no messing image resonated with me and where I was at. And the handle is a Vajra, the diamond thunderbolt. I had no idea what it was when I first saw it, but it just resonated with me and I didn't know why. It was beautiful but strong and solid, and I wanted to hold it. But like most things dharmic, one gets more than one expects. What initially resonated with me, let's just say I've misunderstood the symbolism of the sword somewhat. Fire and blades and battles and swooshing, I got more than I bargained for when I let the mythical flaming sword of wisdom into my life and consciousness. The sword isn't unwieldy. In fact, it's held lightly, poised, ready for the right moment. Force is not required. It's used gently and with ease. It isn't flailing about wildly. It's held with purpose, mindfully, without anger, without revenge. It's used with compassion and wisdom. It's light and elegant. It's not the weapon of one who wishes to destroy in anger. It's the weapon of one who knows when and how to use it for the benefit of all beings. It's the sharp edge that cuts through all the untruths to get to the real truth. And it's held aloft with confidence, without effort. It's the weapon that does not fight needless battles. It strikes with accuracy. It doesn't waste its sharpness or brilliance or misuse its power. It inspires confidence, not fear. And the flames. The flames are a beacon. They light the way. They are not the raging fires of destruction in the way that the fires of anger run out of control indiscriminately, turning everything to ash, the good and the bad, the way that forest fires do. They are the flames of wisdom. They burn cleanly, contained infinitely. They are the flames of transformation. They burn off the dirt and the rust and reveal the shining reality underneath. They burn off the waste and leave the solid diamond core. They transform, they do not destroy. And the long light blade is clean and beautiful. It's not ugly or fearsome. It's not the clunky weapon of a crazed maniac. It's the weapon of a skilled protector, not an attacker. It doesn't need to be heavy and clumsy, barging its way through with unnecessary force. It is light, it is sharp, and used with an accuracy that could slice through a blade of grass. It's the beautiful samurai-like crafted sword of someone who can fight but doesn't need to. It's the sword of wisdom. It's perfectly straight and one-pointed. And the Vajra handle, the diamond thunderbolt. Does one hold the Vajra or does it carry you? The powerful, accurate force of nature, diamond strength, thunderbolt of truth, it cannot be destroyed. If you hold the sword and its Vajra handle, you better be ready. You need to know your intentions. This to me represents the faith aspect, the ethical aspect. If you hold the Vajra handle of the flaming sword of wisdom with dubious intentions, you are likely only to cut or burn yourself, which might not be a bad thing. But whilst on retreat recently, we were looking at personal myths. I won't go into it now, but I transformed what I had as a personal myth or story about myself from one of not trusting myself or having confidence to one of feeling very strong through a faith response. I'll give the short version of the story. It's a Jataka tale, a story of one of the Buddha's previous lives, of which there are many. Now, there was a prince who lived in the palace, and when he turned 16, his father, the king, said he needed to find a teacher. So he sent him with a lot of gold to Taxila. The prince stayed a few years with his teacher, and when he was leaving, his teacher gave him 5 weapons, so he got the name Prince 5 Weapons. Now, on his way home to the palace, the prince came upon a forest. All the locals warned him, "Don't go in because there's a yaksha lives there called Furry Hug and he will kill you." Yeah, he's called Furry Hug. The prince said, "I'm not afraid of the yaksha," and went into the forest. And the yaksha appeared. He was ugly, huge, with saucer eyes and snaggled teeth and matted fur all over his body. And the yaksha saw Prince 5 Weapons and says, "Oi, where are you going? You're my dinner." Prince 5 Weapons said, "You're not going to eat me," and took out his first weapon, which was a bow and arrows. The arrows just stuck in the yaksha's fur and he shook them off. And the yaksha was amused and said, "Do you think you can beat me with that?" And so it went on. The prince then had a spear, and that stuck in his fur, and then a club, and a sling and shots. And the prince, not at all being put off by this, then punched the yaksha, this is the best bit, punched the yaksha, but his fist got stuck in the fur. And then he used his other fist, and then he kicked him, and then he kicked him with his other foot, and then lastly he used his head, and he was completely stuck in the fur of the yaksha. By now the yaksha's feeling a little bit uneasy. Who is this man? So waving him around, the yaksha said, "I knew your weapons were no match for me, and now I'm going to eat you." And the prince said, "No, you won't, because I am Prince 5 Weapons, and I'm not afraid of dying. But I know you are, and I have a weapon inside me that is indestructible and will destroy you. Let me go and you shall live, or we shall both die." That doesn't bother me. So the yaksha was now very unnerved and let the prince down, because he didn't want to die. And Prince 5 Weapons then taught the yaksha the Dharma and set him as a forest protector where he lived peacefully for many hundreds of years. Prince 5 Weapons returned to his palace and lived peacefully, blah blah. Unlike the yaksha at the start of the story, I'm no longer inspired by using energy to destroy. I'm no more like the prince, inspired by using energy and faith to transform, by doing what's needed, by using compassionate energy, the burning desire for the good, strength and beauty and truth, transforming, not destroying. And power does not mean force, passion does not mean anger. I'm so grateful that I saw the image of the sword so early on, for it took who I was, took my energies and fire and passion and turned it on its head. It didn't squash it or tell me it was all wrong. It just showed me, in a way that words cannot, and keeps on showing me, a better way of being. And this story resonated very strongly with me, because like Prince 5 Weapons, I also have a weapon inside me. They may not look the same, but they are both indestructible. My weapon has been forged by another weapon. It's been forged by my relationship with the flaming sword of wisdom. And my weapon looks a little bit different, and it's not yet finished, but it's made of Shraddha and Vajra energy, and by paying attention to symbols and by walking through gateways. I've still got that fire in my belly, but now it is not trying to destroy myself and others in anger. It is burning and transforming my unskillfulness from within. And one day there will just be a diamond there, a Vajra thunderbolt of faith and truth, the handle of my own sword of wisdom.
Okie doke. So a few years ago, in the community, Amogavamsa randomly put out a new picture. And it was this picture, which you won't be able to see, but it's a picture of the Buddha Ratnasambhava, who's the Buddha of the South. And at the bottom of the picture, there are horses. So this is another version of Ratnasambhava. This is drawn by an order member called Sadharaja, where the horses are very prominent. And as soon as I saw the picture, I responded to the horses. Okay? There's a lot in the picture, but I responded to the horses, and it was a bit of a surprise to me. I had absolutely no previous interest in horses at all. My only experience of a horse was a childhood incident when I was bitten by a horse. There was no logical, rational reason for me to be interested in horses, but there was a response. The other aspects I wasn't so interested in. They seem to have more obvious meanings. So Ratnasambhava has this gesture, and it was just very easy for my mind to say, well, that stands for generosity, and so on. But the horses were more mysterious. It was an unexplainable connection, and that was the thing that I stayed with. I was sort of trusted that more because I couldn't rationalise it and I couldn't capture it in my mind and explain it away. So our initial connection with an image might be surprising, and that doesn't matter. As long as it's a real heartfelt connection, it will lead us deeper. So for whatever reason, I felt tantalised by these horses. I think I recognised something of myself in them, which was something to do with suppressed wild energy. So symbols can act as mirrors. We respond to them, so there is something of us in them. So they say something about our longings and aspirations. So when we respond to something, we should take notice of that, take it seriously, and pursue it, as Steph was saying. Not just by going for the nearest book, and that might explain it rationally and theoretically, but really engage with that symbol, spend time with it, develop a feeling for it. So in this talk, I'm not going to say, well, traditionally Buddhism says that horses represent this, this, and this. So what we can do is we can gather actual objects in our everyday experience, or do actual things that help us to investigate that connection. So for example, if we respond to the image of jewels, we can collect jewels, we can make jewels, we can go and see the crown jewels. But do things which cultivate a fascination for that symbol, an obsessive fascination, as obsessive as if it was a love affair. So somehow just to give expression to our strange, mysterious longings. So that's what I've tried to do. So ever since I was ordained in 2011, it was my intention to find someone with a horse who would help me to learn to look after it. And for a long time this intention receded, it sort of faded behind the business and the demands of everyday life. It was partly because I was a bit embarrassed about saying to people, can I befriend your horse, please? But a few months ago, I was put in contact by a Sangha member, the magic of the Sangha, with someone who has a horse quite nearby. And one thing led to another. I think I've missed a picture. Oh, next picture. Yes. That's suppressed wild energies, okay. And the next picture, yay! Okay. So now I go and visit this horse, who's called Chezzy. She's a mare. 1 or 2 mornings a week. And I'm slowly getting to know her and learning what's involved in looking after her. So the love affair has started. I've learned all sorts of things. I've learned how to clean her hooves. I've learned how to fill a hay bag. I've learned which parts of her to apply sun cream to and which parts not to. I've learned how to encourage her to do exercises using a carrot. Put a bridle on. I can get her to walk around me just by waving my arms. So, all sorts of things. So what have I learned about horses as symbols through working with Chesi? And what have I learned about myself? Because in a sense it's the same thing. Well, horses are incredibly powerful. They're bristling with raw energy. There's always something wild and untamable about a horse, however tame they seem to be. So Chesi is very edgy, nervy, highly sensitive to changes in the environment, highly sensitive to emotional changes, very nervous about strangers. She's very moody. And you just get this sense that she's unpredictable. That if she really wanted to, she could break down the stable door and gallop off into the distance, and there's nothing that you could do about it. So there's this abundance of raw, fiery, untapped energy bursting to get out. And just spending time close to her, I really get a sense of that power, that energy, that strength. And that sort of energy, that sort of power needs careful looking after. So if you were to subdue her by force, to forcibly tame her, to make her docile, she would no longer be the noble, regal creature that she is. She'd be broken. That's the term that's used. She would be broken. The best of her would be lost. So rather than breaking her, you have to establish a relationship. Learn to communicate with her and bring all of that wild, unpredictable energy into connection with a human consciousness, my human consciousness. So once there's that mutual understanding, which is developing over time, then it's possible to harness all that energy in a particular direction. So spending time with Chesi has revealed something of significance for me, that I have loads of wild energies too, and that I shouldn't seek to tame myself or to make myself docile or acceptable, but rather establish a relationship with those energies in me, understand them, bring them into communication with my own consciousness, and harness those energies to live my life with greater power and purpose. So if we can find a worthwhile cause to harness ourselves to, and if we avoid making ourselves tame and compliant, our raw energy can be unlocked, befriended and channeled. We can stop holding back. Much newer, much deeper resources become available to us. And we can serve, we can freely serve with all of those energies flowing, but with our nobility intact. So a horse enthusiast would look at this picture and say, what a fine animal, talking about the horse. They might notice that she had some Arabian in her. A Maitridasa enthusiast would look at the picture and say, oh, isn't it nice to see Maitridasa looking so happy? I see something different when I see that picture. So I see that there's a wilder, unpredictable animal part of me that has got lost along the way. It was kept in a dark stable in my depths for a long time, for fear of the damage that it might do. Once or twice in my life, it did kick down the stable doors, broke free, bucking and kicking as it went, and others were shocked to see it and ran a mile, and damage was done. Damage was done to their friendships. So back it went into the dark stable, and this time with a much stronger lock. But without that horse, I'm half the being that I could be. That's what I've realised. I'm not as powerful as I could be, I'm not as energetic, not as potent, things take longer. So I need my horse back. So in that picture I see myself welcoming back my long-lost horse, patiently getting to know it, learning how to communicate with it, learning how to take care of it, befriending it. So maybe the next step will be to learn to ride it. I've had some offers, one from Dawn, to make full use of all that energy, channel it in the direction I want to go, and experience my own strength, to enjoy the wind in my hair as I let loose. There's a disciple of the Buddha called Namdaka who wrote these verses. Just as a fine thoroughbred steed, stumbling, regains its stance, feeling all the more urgency, and draws its burden undaunted. In the same way, remember me, the awakened one's thoroughbred child, his son. So of course, all of this is about finding our strength, finding our power. It's about integration, integrating those deeper, wilder energies. But for me, it doesn't stop there. So horses, for me, aren't just a myth of my own personal integration. So finally, I aspire to break free of worrying all the time about pulling myself together and integrating all those energies. Finally, my aspiration is just to take flight. Next picture. That's not chilling. So any symbol or any practice that we do is only truly spiritual to the extent that it helps us to leave behind self-centeredness. And ultimately, all spiritual practices are pointing beyond the isolated, fixed self as we usually experience ourselves towards a vision of the magnificent, mysterious being that we could become. And finally, like the Buddha himself, having gathered and channeled our energies, we have to take flight into the unknown. One of my favourite albums is by a group called One Giant Leap. And in one of the songs, there's a short poem, which is apparently by someone called Christopher Logue, for anyone who's into poetry. And it goes like this. Come to the edge, we said. And they said, no, it's too high. Come to the edge, we said. And they said, no, we're going to fall. Come to the edge, we said. And they very, very reluctantly came. And we pushed, and they flew. Next picture. So there's another mythic horse symbol in Buddhism, which is the wind horse. Okay, so this is the wind horse. Again, a drawing by Sadaraja. So this is the horse that has taken flight. The wind horse is said to combine the speed of the wind and the bristling power of the horse, and it carries the 3 jewels on its back, taking them wherever they're needed by living beings, which is everywhere. So Sangha has written a poem about the wind horse, and I'll just finish by reading a part of that poem. And I can see that this picture has been drawn based on this poem, actually. I am the wind horse. I am the king of space, the master of infinity, traversing the universe with flashing fiery hooves, nostrils breathing fire. On my strong back, on a saddle blazing with gems, I bear through the world the 3 flaming jewels. My loud names as I pour the clouds echo and re-echo throughout the universe, waking those who sleep, putting to flight the hosts of apathy and despair. I am the wind horse. I am thought at its clearest, emotion at its noblest, energy at its most abundant. I am reverence. I am friendliness. I am joy. I only among beasts am pure enough, strong enough, swift enough to bear on my back the 3 flaming jewels. The pride of the lion is not enough. The strength of the bull is not enough. The splendour of the peacock is not enough. With what joy I sweep through the air, bearing age after age my thrice precious burden. With what joy, with what ecstasy I fulfil the greatest of all destinies. Plunging or soaring, I leave behind me a rainbow track. Thank you.
I've really enjoyed listening to those 2 talks. It's kind of forgotten I've got to come up and speak as well. So we've seen 2 really good examples of how a symbol can grab you emotionally, and it can mean more and more. It can start to unpack and unravel more and more and deeper layers of meaning if you develop a connection, a relationship with a symbol. And I'm going to talk about a myth, which is, when I thought about which story would I like to talk about, this one stood out as one I'd like to talk about. And it's a myth. Well, in a way, myths are stories that just have lots of symbols in them. They're stories full of symbols, and the myths can be about a surface level. They can be about a story, which can sometimes seem quite superficial or unimportant, but there can be deeper layers of meaning and truth in the story. So I'm going to tell this particular story and just give my take on it, what it speaks to me. So it's the story of Theseus and the Minotaur from the Greek legends. And so it's a story that involves wild animals and swords, so it by coincidence ties together some of the other symbols. And the story begins in Crete with King Minos of Crete. According to the legends, King Minos had a divine lineage. He was a son of Zeus. So often in these Greek legends, people have got more than one parent. It's they've got a kind of biological parent, and sometimes a god is their parent as well. And King Minos, his parent was Zeus, his father was Zeus. But he wasn't a pleasant character. King Minos wasn't a pleasant character, or what we might call a skillful character. He wasn't a pleasant king. He was a very aggressive king. He waged war on neighbouring cities, Athens, the neighbouring city of Athens. He waged war on those people. He was also unfaithful to his wife in lots of occasions. There's the accounts of lots and lots of women, lots of times that he was unfaithful to his wife. And before he became king, he basically competed with his brothers. There was a number of different claims to the throne of king, and King Minos, or Prince Minos, went to battle with some of his brothers to become the king, to take the throne. And to kind of cap it all off, he's quite arrogant as well and cocky, and he's the son of Zeus after all. And he said, well, just to prove I'm the claimant to the throne, the gods will answer my prayer. I pray to the god Poseidon to give me a bull, to give me a sacrificial bull, and that will prove that I'm the rightful heir to the throne. And you often get more than you bargain for in these kind of stories. And straight away, Poseidon produced a brilliant white bull, came out of the ocean and came to King Minos, to Prince Minos, King Minos. So just to pause the story there and say, Poseidon, the god Poseidon, features quite a few times in this myth. And it's interesting that he's the god of the oceans, the depths in a way, the depths of the ocean, which is often a symbol for our untapped energies, our kind of the depths of our mind. You can't really see the bottoms of the ocean. We don't really know how deep it is. We don't really know what's there. So the oceans can be a symbol for that element of our being, of our mind. And Poseidon is the king of this. So Poseidon reoccurs in the story, but to begin with, he answers Minos' prayers and produces this amazing, brilliant white bull. And part of the deal was that Minos was going to sacrifice this bull. That's what his deal was. He said to Poseidon, produce this bull for me to sacrifice. But he was so taken with this bull, it was such a special bull from the gods, he didn't want to sacrifice it. So he thought, well, the gods won't notice, I'll just keep the bull, I'll sacrifice a different bull. Which is what he does. He sacrifices a different bull and keeps this prized bull, which becomes famous throughout Greece and the lands. So that's the start. Just pausing the story there, that's the start of the story. But you can see from the introduction to King Minos, he's not a pleasant character. He's what we might call an unskillful person, using Buddhist terminology, Buddhist jargon. Classically, the king can be a symbol, or kingdom can be a symbol for our mind, actually, for the mind or for our being. And an ordered mind will usually have a king. A king can symbolise a mind with order, a mind that's kind of focused around something, ordered around something. But kings can be benevolent or malevolent, and our mind can also be focused around unskillfulness. People can be very successful and can be very focused, have a mind that's very focused around selfishness and about themselves and getting what they want. And this is what King Minos represents for me, a mind that is focused around himself and doesn't care about the cost to other people. But as Buddhists, we know that there are repercussions, there are consequences to that kind of mind and that kind of action. So the law of karma tells us, well, if we act on particularly unskillful strands, they grow stronger. And the law of karma says, well, those strands, those actions will give birth to something which is more unskillful, a mind which is more deeply unskillful, and that will cause suffering. And you can see the law of karma and rebirth, literally you can see it in terms of life after life, or you can also see it in terms of psychological rebirth, that we're giving birth to new states and new states of mind. And Sangha was asked once, after he'd given a lecture on rebirth, a woman apparently came up to him and says, "Do you mean to tell me that I could be reborn as a chicken?" And Sangha replied, "Well, no, madam, not unless you think like a chicken." It's a really, I like that response. What it kind of pinpoints is really, it's the mind which is key in Buddhism. It's what you think and how you think which creates what you will become. So if you think like a chicken, you'll become like a chicken. In this story, King Minos was an unskillful, greedy, aggressive, deceitful, competitive, envious, jealous, untrustworthy, unreliable man. And basically what happened in the story, the legends happened to the story, his wife, Poseidon curses his wife or casts a spell on his wife. His wife, well, actually, it goes further than that, but we won't go into the details. But his wife gives birth to a bull, half human. So now King Minos has as a son who is half bull and half human. And very, very well. If you just look at that symbol, very, very powerful symbol for. What we could become, actually, a mind which is an animal mind. If we really act on our animal instincts and our animal urges, what we will become is somebody with the mind of an animal. And the bull symbolises, when we talk about the bull in a china shop, destruction, power, rage, anger, like a bull let loose. You think twice about walking through a field with a bull in it and waving a red flag around. You wouldn't do that. A bull has got tremendous power, tremendous potential for rage, destruction, and virility as well. A bull symbolises virility and, lust, sex, I suppose. So this was what drove King Minos, and in the legends, this, what happened was his wife bore a child which was half bull, half man, which was called the Minotaur. Minos' bull, the Minotaur. And it was destructive. There's suffering as a consequence of this as well. The Minotaur caused havoc and fed on human beings. The Minotaur ate human beings. So, you get this, basically the king waging war in different lands, but actually there is disharmony, there's consequences and suffering in his own kingdom. The Minotaur is causing havoc in his own kingdom. So, the Oracle of Delphi, who features a lot in Greek legends, Minos went to her for some advice, and he was told what he needed to do was to build a labyrinth, to build an underground maze, and to have the Minotaur put in the middle of this labyrinth so he wouldn't be able to escape. So again, it's an account of we've got a wild, perhaps it's a wilder energy, an untamable, an un-Buddhist energy, and the solution seems to be to lock the stable door. Like Maitridasa was saying, to bolt the stable door, to lock it in a dark place, underground, in a labyrinth where it won't escape. There was also another side story to this, is that the Athenians asked the Oracle of Delphi for advice as well. How could they make peace with, how could they stop this war from Minos, how could they stop this tyrant Minos from attacking them? And the Oracle of Delphi said, well, what you need to do is make a peace offering. And you need to offer to send every 9 years 7 of your boys and 7 of your girls to be eaten by the Minotaur. So, in a sense, you've got a peace created. You've got the Minotaur locked away, he's not causing havoc in Crete, and you've got a peace with Athens, but in a sense it's unsatisfactory. You've got the Minotaur locked away, you've got the bull child locked away, and maybe all the energy that represents locked away. But it's not satisfactory because there's still destruction. The babies are getting eaten still, the children are getting eaten. So now enters our hero, Theseus. Theseus is the hero of the story. And he apparently, he was the son of the king of Athens, the son of King Aegeus, but also the son of Poseidon, son of the god of the depths. So Theseus was a person who could face the Minotaur, who could go to meet the Minotaur. So Theseus volunteers to be one of the 7 people that will go into the labyrinth, and he volunteers to take on to face the Minotaur. So the hero in this story, and the hero in lots of myths, lots of stories, doesn't run away from the demon or the monster, doesn't lock it up. The hero will go face to face with that energy that this demon represents, and that's what, as Buddhists, as heroes in our Buddhist life, we need to do. We need to go face to face with the scary bits of ourselves, with the bits that seem un-Buddhist, that seem not very nice. We need to go face to face with them. We need to encounter them. We need to come into a relationship with them. So, like Prince Five Weapons, who doesn't hide from the hug, furry hug, the actual furry hug. Prince Five Weapons goes into it and ends up, stuck with furry hug. You get the story of the Buddha who befriends the Nagas, Padmasambhava who befriends the demons and converts them in Tibet. So Buddhist stories and legends, and also other legends and other cultures, in our culture, Greek culture, the hero needs to go and face the monster, not to run away from it, not to lock it away. So that's what Theseus does. He volunteers to go into the labyrinth, to go into the maze, and he's got luck on his side, because as he arrives in Crete, the daughter and half-sister of the Minotaur, the daughter of King Minos, Ariadne, falls in love with Theseus. And she doesn't want to see him fail. She wants to see him defeat the Minotaur. So she goes to visit in secret Theseus, and she gives him 2 things which help him to conquer the Minotaur, to succeed. She gives him a sword. So we've heard about swords, and I'll say a little bit more about the sword, but she gives him a sword, and she gives him a magical ball of thread. And so what she does is she gives him a ball of thread so that he can tie one end to the opening of the labyrinth, and as he goes down into the centre of the labyrinth, he can find his way back out again. It's also said the thread magically will tell him how to get to the centre of the labyrinth. And Theseus also is given a sword so he can fight and defeat the Minotaur. So for me, this was the reason this myth spoke to me, and the reason I wanted to speak about it was just this part of it. Actually, I've spoken a lot about the rest of it, but this part of it was the bit that really spoke to me. What does it mean that Theseus had a ball of thread that meant he could go down and come back again? When he's going to encounter the Minotaur, what does that mean? And what might the sword mean? And one of the associations I have with the sword of Manjushri and the sword of often with sword is they can represent wisdom. They can, as Steph was talking about, they can represent our awareness. So it's said that the sword of Manjushri will just cut through delusion, will just cut through stories, and sometimes scary, frightening stories that can seem like monsters. The wisdom and awareness will just cut through them, and they're not scary, they're not frightening anymore. And I spoke a couple of weeks ago about how Padmasambhava has a demon dagger, a purba, which has a similar use, a very sharp edge, which will just pin down a demon so it can look at it. So if we've got a scary story or a scary emotion, having awareness, really looking at it with the kind of piercing glare of awareness, it stops becoming scary, it stops being able to have power over us. So the sword of Theseus is one of his weapons. If we're going to be a hero and face our difficult aspects and our wilder energies, we need to do so with awareness, real clear awareness. But then for me, what the thread represents is we need to have also a connection with what's highest in us. We need to maintain at all times a connection with what's best in us, the higher level. And for me, the reference and the kind of guide to what's the best in me are the 5 precepts of ethics. So if I'm going to give space and give energy and give my attention to my anger or my rage or my jealousy or whatever bits of it might be, it's only safe to do that. Thank you. It's only safe to do that. It's nice to have a sword waved at me. The only way, if I'm going to face these kind of scary, monstrous emotions, I need to be able to contain them so other people aren't harmed. Actually, if I'm going to experience the emotions, I need to make sure other people don't get harmed. And ethics is what does that. Ethics creates a boundary, so our actions aren't informed by these emotions. We don't get carried away. We don't get lost in the labyrinth. the emotions. We don't get kind of drowned in our anger or drowned in our whatever is our particular emotional state. So if we're going to go face to face with these wilder aspects of ourselves, we need to go armed with awareness and with ethics. Ethics will be that which keeps a reference and a thread to what's highest in us, and ultimately to the gods, actually, to what's to the Buddha, not the gods, but the Buddha. Because the 5 precepts are how the Buddha behaves. It's a connection to the Buddha. So, in a sense, I've raced through a myth with lots of symbolism, but hopefully giving you a sense of how one myth can just be layered with lots and lots of very, very rich symbols which can have all kinds of different meanings. And this is just my connection with this particular myth, but it might say different things to you. That's the beauty, I think, as Steph was saying as well, of a symbol. And Maitridasa was saying as well, symbols can speak different things to different people, as can myths. So we just introduce you to just 2 symbols and a myth that we each find personally grabbing. So hopefully that's given you a flavour of how that can work. Okay.